3 weeks on an overseas cybersecurity assignment for the NSA had left me exhausted. All I wanted was the comfort of my quiet suburban home in Oakwood Estates. I pulled into my driveway at sunset, the golden light washing over identical houses with perfect lawns. Home sweet home, I thought to myself. It was not until I stepped out of my car that I noticed something was wrong. A strange metallic structure protruded from my roof, approximately 6 feet tall with a mesh dish and blinking indicator lights. I stood frozen, staring upward in disbelief. This had not been there when I left. I dropped my luggage and rushed inside, moving with the practiced efficiency that comes from years of government training. Something was severely wrong. Inside, I methodically checked room by room, clearing corners with precision born from habit. In the attic, I discovered the true extent of the intrusion. The tower had been professionally mounted through my roof, anchored to support beams, and hardwired directly into my electrical system. A separate control box hummed quietly, with network cables running to a router I did not recognize. I pulled out my phone and dialed the HOA management office. An automated system informed me that business hours were Monday through Friday, and I should leave a message or submit an online request form. I ended the call and sent an urgent email instead, stating clearly that unauthorized equipment had been installed on my property without consent. The next morning, I received a generic response. All infrastructure improvements have been approved by the board. For questions, please attend the monthly meeting scheduled for 3 weeks from now. This was unacceptable. I walked to the local HOA office located in our neighborhood clubhouse. The receptionist looked nervous when I explained the situation. "You will need to speak with Mrs. Whitfield directly," she said, avoiding eye contact. "She handles all telecommunications matters personally." Hours later, Karen Whitfield arrived at my door. She was a tall woman with perfectly styled blonde hair and a permanent smile that never reached her eyes. 2 board members flanked her like personal security. "Mr. Davis," she said without offering her hand, "I understand you have concerns about our community internet improvement project." "You installed equipment on my property without permission," I stated flatly. "I want it removed immediately." Karen tilted her head, her smile unwavering. The Oakwood Estates bylaws grant the association access rights for community improvements. The board approved this measure under emergency provisions when our previous service provider terminated their contract. Everyone benefits from faster internet and better cellular reception. "That does not explain why my house was selected without consultation," I countered. "Your property sits at the optimal elevation point for maximum coverage," she explained as if speaking to a child. "The board has authority over all exterior modifications and infrastructure in Oakwood Estates. The decision is final." After they left, I retreated to my home office. My professional instincts were now fully engaged. I connected specialized diagnostic equipment to my network and began scanning the new installation. What I discovered sent ice through my veins. The tower was not just providing internet access. It was actively monitoring all network traffic passing through it. Data packets were being intercepted, copied, and transmitted to an external server. This was not a simple Wi-Fi relay. This was a sophisticated surveillance system disguised as community infrastructure. As an NSA cybersecurity specialist, I recognized the pattern immediately. Someone was harvesting data from the entire neighborhood, and they had selected my house as the perfect transmission point. The irony would have been amusing if it were not so alarming. Karen Whitfield and her HOA cronies had inadvertently connected their spying operation to the home of someone specifically trained to detect and neutralize such threats. I sat back in my chair, weighing my options carefully. This was not just about an unauthorized installation anymore. This was about protecting my neighbors from a significant privacy breach. I needed to proceed carefully, gathering evidence before confronting the HOA again. They had no idea who they were dealing with, and for now, that was my advantage. That night, I transformed my home office into an intelligence gathering station. Years of training had prepared me for situations requiring methodical analysis and documentation. I arranged multiple monitors on my desk, each displaying different aspects of the network traffic being transmitted through the tower on my roof. The blue glow from the screens illuminated my concentrated expression as I worked through the night. I used specialized software to capture and decode the data packets without triggering any security alerts in their SIS. What I found confirmed my worst suspicions. The tower was part of a neighborhood-wide surveillance network. Each home in Oakwood Estates had been equipped with a smaller receiver that connected to the main tower on my roof. The system was not just providing internet access, it was actively collecting data from every connected device in the neighborhood. I pulled up property records and business registrations, searching for connections. By morning, I had uncovered a troubling relationship. Karen Whitfield held a significant ownership stake in Clearview Technologies, the company that had installed the equipment. The HOA had paid Clearview nearly $200,000 for the installation, using funds from our mandatory infrastructure improvement fees. But the financial trail did not end there. Clearview was selling aggregated data to marketing firms, creating a secondary revenue stream that was not being disclosed to the community. Karen was essentially double-dipping, profiting from both the installation contract and the ongoing data sales. I carefully documented everything, creating forensic backups that would stand up to legal scrutiny. The evidence was damning, but I needed more information about how deeply this operation extended into the neighborhood. The next day, I casually visited several neighbors, ostensibly to discuss the new internet improvements. Most seemed unaware of the privacy implications, but a few expressed concerns. "They threatened to fine me when I questioned the installation," whispered Tom Jenkins, a retired teacher living 2 doors down. He glanced nervously toward the street as we spoke on his porch. Said it was a violation of community aesthetics to refuse the equipment. Sarah Miller, who lived across the street, shared a similar story. "I work in healthcare. I told them I had concerns about patient data confidentiality with this new system. They sent me a violation notice the next day for my garden being an inch too tall." Each conversation revealed a pattern of intimidation and coercion. The HOA under Karen Whitfield had systematically silenced any opposition through threats and selective enforcement of regulations. That evening, I made a secure call to Michael, a former NSA colleague who now worked in the private sector. "Need some background checks run," I said, using our old shorthand. "Sending you the names now, completely off book." "Trouble in paradise?" Michael asked. "Just some HOA overreach," I replied casually, "but it might connect to larger data security concerns." "Consider it done," he assured me. "We'll have preliminary results by tomorrow." Michael delivered as promised. Karen Whitfield had previous connections to data mining operations in 3 other communities. 2 board members had financial ties to Clearview Technologies through shell companies. This was not their first operation, just their most ambitious. I spread all the documents across my kitchen table, mapping the connections between the HOA leadership, Clearview Technologies, and the marketing firms purchasing our data. The picture was becoming clear. This was a sophisticated operation hiding behind suburban authority. My professional assessment was complete. What had begun as personal indignation over property violation had evolved into something far more serious. My neighbors were being exploited, their privacy systematically violated for profit. As I organized my findings, I felt a familiar resolve settling in. This was not just about a tower on my roof anymore. This was about protecting people from a predatory scheme. I had the skills and training to dismantle this operation. Now I needed to attempt resolution through proper channels before escalating further. Armed with technical documentation and legal research, I prepared a formal removal request through proper HOA channels. The 10-page document detailed specific violations of property rights, FCC regulations, and privacy laws. I submitted it through their online portal and received an automated acknowledgement. 3 days passed with no response. I called the HOA office and requested a meeting with the board. The receptionist scheduled me for the following Tuesday. When Tuesday arrived, I received an email 30 minutes before the appointed time. "Due to unforeseen circumstances, today's meeting must be rescheduled. We apologize for any inconvenience." This pattern repeated twice more. Each rescheduled meeting was subsequently canceled at the last minute. Their strategy was obvious, hoping I would grow frustrated and abandon my complaint. I drafted formal letters detailing the legal violations and sent them via certified mail to each board member. A week later, the envelopes returned marked "Refused" in bold red letters. They were deliberately avoiding official documentation of the complaints. Rain fell steadily as I walked door to door throughout the neighborhood. My goal was to rally enough homeowners to call for a special meeting, which required 20% support according to the bylaws. "I agree completely," said one neighbor behind a barely opened door, "but I cannot sign anything. We are trying to sell our house next spring, and any conflict with the HOA could affect our property value." Others shared similar concerns. "Karen has friends in the county assessor's office," another whispered. "Cross her, and suddenly your property taxes get reassessed." The fear was palpable. Karen Whitfield had created a climate of intimidation that effectively silenced opposition. The annual neighborhood barbecue provided an unexpected confrontation. I was filling my plate when Karen approached, surrounded by her usual entourage of board members. "Mr. Davis," she announced loudly enough for nearby residents to hear, "I understand you have been disturbing the neighborhood with alarmist claims about our internet upgrade." "I have legitimate concerns about unauthorized equipment on my property," I responded calmly. Karen laughed. "This is precisely why we needed to improve our infrastructure. Some residents are simply technologically ignorant." She addressed the gathering crowd. "Mr. Davis works with computers, but apparently does not understand community progress. The board voted unanimously for these improvements that benefit everyone." Several neighbors avoided eye contact with me. Karen had effectively isolated me as an obstacle to community advancement. The next morning, I found a bright orange violation notice attached to my mailbox. "Improper lawn maintenance, Section 7.3 of Covenant." My lawn was identical to every other lawn on the street. 2 days later, another notice cited unauthorized window treatments, Section 12.1. My blinds had been in place since I purchased the house 3 years ago. The message was clear. Opposition would be met with harassment. As a final attempt at proper resolution, I hand-delivered a letter to Karen during her regular office hours. The document outlined specific legal consequences of the unauthorized installation, including potential federal violations. Karen read the first paragraph, then dramatically tore the letter into pieces while maintaining direct eye contact. "Let me be absolutely clear," she said coldly. "The board makes decisions for this community, not you. If you cannot accept that fact, perhaps Oakwood Estates is not the right neighborhood for you." The board members standing behind her nodded in agreement. I said nothing, simply turned and walked away. That evening, I sat in my home office, watching the blinking lights of the tower reflected in my window. I had exhausted every proper channel for resolution. Karen Whitfield had made a critical error in judgment. She thought she was dealing with an ordinary homeowner she could bully into submission. She had declared war on the wrong person. It was time for a strategic pivot. My NSA identification card sat on the kitchen table before me. I rarely used my government credentials for personal matters, but this situation had escalated beyond a simple property dispute. The surveillance system on my roof potentially constituted a national security concern, given the nature and volume of data being harvested. I placed a call to my supervisor, Director Harrington. "Sir, I need to report a potential security breach in my residential area," I began carefully. "Go ahead," he replied, immediately shifting to a more serious tone. "A surveillance system has been installed on residential properties without proper authorization. The system is collecting and transmitting significant amounts of personal data. Given my position and the nature of materials I occasionally access from my home network, this represents a potential vulnerability." Harrington understood the implications immediately. "Document everything. Submit a preliminary report through secure channels. Do not take direct action yet." "Understood, sir." With official channels now aware of the situation, I began implementing a comprehensive documentation strategy. I installed discrete cameras monitoring the tower and the HOA office. Every communication, every violation notice, every interaction was meticulously recorded and time-stamped. Using equipment from my professional toolkit, I established a secure monitoring system that tracked exactly what data was being transmitted from the tower. The results were alarming. The system was capturing banking information when residents accessed their accounts. It logged email contents, shopping habits, and even conversations near smart devices. Further research revealed that Karen was selling this aggregated neighborhood data to multiple marketing firms. The contracts specifically highlighted the affluent demographic profile of Oakwood Estates, promising comprehensive lifestyle insights from an engaged residential community. I needed allies within the neighborhood. I identified 7 homeowners who see Imed most resistant to HOA intimidation and created a secure communication channel using encrypted messaging apps. I provided each with specialized equipment that would alert them to monitoring of their personal devices. What we are dealing with is not just an overreaching HOA, I explained to the small group gathered in Tom Jenkins' basement. This is organized data theft disguised as community improvement. But what can we do? Asked Sarah Miller. Karen controls everything. Not everything, I replied, not the law. In my home office, I developed a comprehensive 3-phase counterplan using techniques from my government operations training. Phase 1, evidence collection and documentation. I would continue gathering irrefutable evidence of privacy violations and financial impropriety. Phase 2, regulatory and legal engagement. Multiple agencies would be simultaneously notified of various aspects of the scheme. Phase 3, community mobilization and confrontation. Armed with official backing, we would force a public reckoning. Maps of the neighborhood adorned my walls, marking the location of each surveillance device. Financial flowcharts traced money from our HOA fees through Clearview Technologies to Karen's personal accounts. Network diagrams showed exactly how data was being harvested and sold. Late one night, standing before this evidence wall, I allowed myself a small smile of professional satisfaction. The operation was taking shape. Karen thought she was dealing with an angry homeowner, but she was actually facing a trained operative with extensive resources and experience dismantling complex threats. The next morning, I distributed secure communication devices to my core group of allies. Each received specific assignments for documentation and evidence gathering. Record every interaction with board members, I instructed them. Note any selective enforcement of rules against residents who question the HOA. Tom Jenkins reported back the next day. They are discussing installing cameras at the community pool and playground. Karen called it enhanced security features, but the contract mentions facial recognition capabilities. Sarah Miller discovered that the HOA was running credit checks on potential homebuyers without proper disclosure. They are charging a documentation fee, but actually selling the financial information. Each piece of evidence strengthened our case. I created secure digital backups of everything, encrypting the files with government-grade protocols. During this intelligence-gathering phase, I maintained a purposefully low profile. When I encountered Karen at community events, I was polite but distant. Let her believe I had accepted defeat. The most effective operations were those where the target never saw the response coming until it was too late. By the end of 2 weeks, my evidence package was substantial. The surveillance system was far more invasive than even I had initially suspected. Karen had essentially created a private data harvesting operation using HOA authority as cover. She was not just violating our privacy, she was violating federal laws regarding unauthorized data collection and wire communications. The time had come to activate the second phase of my plan. This was no longer a homeowner versus HOA dispute. This was a trained operative methodically dismantling a security threat. Karen Whitfield had inadvertently picked a fight with precisely the wrong person, and she was about to discover the consequences of her actions. The law offices of Garrison and Associates occupied the 12th floor of a downtown office building. Patricia Garrison specialized in telecommunications law and held the necessary security clearances to handle sensitive government-adjacent cases. I had worked with her office during previous operations. "This is disturbingly comprehensive," Patricia said, reviewing the evidence I had compiled. Her expression grew increasingly concerned as she flipped through the documentation. They have violated at least 6 federal statutes that I can identify immediately. I need this handled through official channels, I explained. Multiple agencies, simultaneous filings. Patricia nodded. We can coordinate that. The FCC will be particularly interested in the unauthorized transmission equipment. The consumer protection angle falls under the FTC and State Attorney General. Over the next week, we filed formal complaints with a carefully orchestrated sequence of agencies. Each filing highlighted different aspects of the operation, ensuring maximum regulatory engagement. The Federal Communications Commission received detailed technical specifications of the unauthorized equipment, along with documentation of signal interference and unauthorized use of restricted frequencies. The complaint emphasized the lack of proper permits and licensing. The Federal Trade Commission received evidence of deceptive business practices, focusing on the undisclosed data collection and the financial relationship between the HOA and Clearview Technologies. The State Attorney General's office received comprehensive documentation of consumer privacy violations, highlighting the collection of sensitive personal and financial information without consent or proper disclosure. Finally, we contacted the FBI Cybercrime Division regarding potential wire fraud charges, given that data was being transmitted across state lines without authorization. These filings will trigger investigations from multiple angles, Patricia explained. Each agency operates independently, but the combined pressure will be substantial. I left her office with a sense of methodical satisfaction. The legal machinery was now in motion. The next phase involved local governance. I scheduled meetings with county commissioners regarding permit violations and building code infractions related to the installation of the towers. These installations required structural modifications to residential buildings. I explained to Commissioner Roberts, spreading photographs across his desk. No permits were filed or approved. This is concerning, he admitted, examining the documentation, particularly the electrical connections. These create significant fire hazards if not properly inspected. The HOA has been operating outside county regulations for some time, I added, presenting additional evidence of code violations. The commissioner assured me his office would investigate immediately. We will send inspectors to assess the situation this week. While official channels began their work, I prepared an anonymous package for the local news station's investigative team. The package included redacted financial documents showing the connection between Karen Whitfield, Clearview Technologies, and the data marketing firms. I included sample data captures demonstrating the invasive nature of the surveillance, with all personal identifying information removed. I dropped the envelope at the station's reception desk, addressed to Susan Chen, their lead investigative reporter. For your privacy investigation series, I had written on the envelope. Throughout these interactions, I maintained professional composure. Where Karen had relied on emotional intimidation and bullying, I operated with precision and documentation. Each filing, each meeting, each submission was another strand in the net being woven around the HOA leadership. The final step in my legal groundwork involved preparing for direct community action. I reviewed the HOA bylaws thoroughly, identifying a provision that allowed for emergency meetings with only 15% of residents supporting the call. My quiet network of allies had grown to represent 18% of homeowners. In Tom Jenkins' basement, I addressed the core group of concerned residents. The legal groundwork has been laid, I explained, distributing copies of a comprehensive briefing document. Multiple agencies are now investigating. The next step is to force a public confrontation. Hope dawned on faces that had been resigned to defeat. Sarah Miller, who had been particularly intimidated by Karen's tactics, spoke up. Will this actually work? Can we really stand up to them? The evidence is irrefutable, I assured her, and we now have official backing from multiple agencies. Karen has operated in shadows, using fear and intimidation. We are bringing everything into the light. That evening, I sealed a final package addressed to each HOA board member. The letter formally notified them of an emergency community meeting, citing the bylaw provision and listing the supporting homeowners. Attached was a summary of the legal actions already in motion. "Do we deliver these ourselves?" Tom asked nervously. "No," I replied. "These will be delivered by certified mail with return receipts, everything by the book from this point forward." As I watched the local evening news that night, Susan Chen appeared on screen. Coming up at 11, our investigation into questionable practices by local homeowners associations. Are they protecting communities or profiting from them? The pieces were falling into place. The legal pressure would soon be complemented by public exposure. The combination would create an inescapable vice for Karen Whitfield and her board. I sat on my porch that evening, watching the blinking lights of the tower on my roof. Soon those lights would go dark. Justice was methodical, and while it sometimes worked slowly, it worked thoroughly when properly directed. Karen had spent years building her power through fear. She was about to discover that true power came from somewhere else entirely. The Oakwood Estates Community Center had never been so crowded. Residents filed in, filling every available chair and standing along the walls. The emergency meeting notice had created a buzz throughout the neighborhood, and curiosity had drawn even those who typically avoided HOA functions. I arrived last, accompanied by Patricia Garrison and two technical experts from her firm. A representative from the county commissioner's office stood nearby, clipboard in hand. We had arranged for a court reporter to create an official transcript of the proceedings. Karen Whitfield sat at the head table with the board members flanking her. Her usual confident smile faltered momentarily when she saw my companions, but she quickly recovered. "I call this meeting to order," she announced, tapping her gavel sharply. "While I question the validity of this emergency session, I will allow it to proceed briefly before we return to our regular agenda." "Point of order," I stated clearly, approaching the microphone set up for community comments. This meeting was called under Bylaw Provision 5.7, which supersedes the regular agenda until its conclusion. I have the signed petitions confirming the required percentage of homeowners. The room grew quiet as Karen examined the documents I presented. Her face tightened almost imperceptibly. "Very well," she conceded. "You have the floor for 15 minutes. "I will need the projector," I replied, connecting my laptop to the system. The large screen at the front of the room illuminated with a technical diagram of the tower installation on my roof. I began my presentation with the precision of an expert witness. Approximately 2 months ago, Oakwood Estates HOA authorized the installation of what was described as internet infrastructure improvements throughout our neighborhood, I began. What was not disclosed was the true nature and purpose of this equipment. I advanced to the next slide, showing network traffic analysis charts. This is not simply internet service equipment. It is an advanced data collection system that monitors, intercepts, and stores personal information from every connected device in our homes. A murmur ran through the audience. Karen leaned forward, her hand reaching for the gavel, but Patricia Garrison caught her eye and subtly shook her head in warning. "The system collects banking information, email contents, shopping habits, and even activates microphones on smart devices," I continued, advancing through slides that demonstrated each claim with technical evidence. The next section of my presentation revealed the financial connections. Clearview Technologies, the company paid nearly $200,000 for this installation, is partially owned by Karen Whitfield. The screen displayed corporate registration documents with highlighted sections. Our mandatory HOA fees funded this project, while the data collected is being sold to marketing firms, creating a secondary revenue stream not disclosed to residents. Gasps rippled through the room. Karen stood abruptly. "This is slander. I will not allow these baseless accusations." "Ms. Whitfield, I would advise against interrupting," Patricia Garrison stated calmly. "Everything presented is documented and verified. Multiple federal agencies are currently investigating these activities." I continued methodically, displaying evidence of selective enforcement against residents who questioned the board. The the financial transactions showing personal profit from community funds, and the technical violations of federal communications law. One of the technical experts took over briefly, explaining in accessible terms exactly how the system compromised personal privacy. Any device connected to your home network was essentially being monitored. Banking passwords, private emails, even conversations near smart speakers were accessible. Throughout the presentation, I watched Karen's expression transform from dismissive to concerned to panicked. Board members began shifting uncomfortably in their seats, some whispering urgently to each other. When Karen attempted to cut the presentation short, residents themselves protested. "Let them finish," called several voices from the crowd. The county inspector presented his findings next. None of these installations received proper permits or inspections. They represent significant code violations and potential fire hazards due to improper electrical connections. Karen stood again, her composure cracking visibly. "This meeting is out of order. As board president, I am ending this immediately." "Actually," said Tom Jenkins, rising from his seat, "the bylaws are clear. Once an emergency meeting is properly called, only a majority vote of attending homeowners can end it before all business is concluded." Sarah Miller stood as well. "I move that we continue this meeting until all evidence has been presented." "Second," called multiple voices. Karen's face flushed with anger. "You do not understand what you are doing. These infrastructure improvements benefit everyone. This is nothing but a vindictive attack by someone who does not appreciate community progress." Her outburst silenced the room. In the quiet that followed, I displayed the final slide, showing the complete legal complaints filed with the FCC, FTC, FBI, and State Attorney General. "These are not accusations," I stated calmly. "These are documented violations of federal and state law. The investigations are already underway." Karen looked desperately to the board members for support, but they were physically distancing themselves from her. One board member cleared his throat nervously. "I was not aware of the financial relationship with Clearview," he said. "I was told this was a standard service upgrade." Another board member nodded agreement. "We were not informed about the data collection aspects." Karen's carefully constructed authority collapsed in real time. "This is absurd. You all approved everything. You cannot place this solely on me." Her final desperate attempt to maintain control devolved into a public meltdown that revealed her true contempt for the community. "I have carried this neighborhood for years. None of you appreciated what I built here. The rest of you are too stupid to understand what it takes to run a modern community." Throughout her outburst, I remained calm, allowing her words to hang in the air. I had not raised my voice once during the entire presentation. I simply presented fact after damning fact with the calm assurance of someone who knew the battle was already won. The vote that followed was nearly unanimous. Karen Whitfield and the entire board were removed from their positions, effective immediately. An interim committee was established to work with authorities during the investigation. As residents filed out, many stopped to thank me. Karen stormed past, pausing only briefly to hiss, "You have no idea what you have done." I met her gaze steadily. Actually, I knew exactly what I was doing from the moment I saw that tower on my roof. Morning sunlight illuminated workers in safety harnesses carefully dismantling the tower from my roof. Similar scenes played out across the neighborhood as each component of the surveillance network was removed. County inspectors supervised the process, ensuring all electrical connections were properly restored. Federal agents in windbreakers cataloged each piece of equipment as evidence, documenting serial numbers and technical specifications. Neighbors gathered in small groups on their lawns, watching with evident relief as the intrusive technology was removed from their homes. News vans lined the main entrance to Oakwood Estates. The story had broken nationally after Susan Chen's investigative report aired. Privacy violated. How one homeowners association crossed the digital line had triggered intense public interest in HOA overreach. I watched from my driveway as Karen Whitfield was escorted from her home by federal agents. She maintained an expression of indignant disbelief, clearly shocked that consequences had finally caught up with her. The cameras captured the moment perfectly, transforming from a powerful neighborhood tyrant to a potential federal defendant in the space of a morning. The charges against Karen and key board members were substantial. Wire fraud, unauthorized data collection, privacy violations, and financial impropriety formed the core of federal indictments. Additional state charges related to consumer protection violations and operating without proper permits. Clearview Technologies faced its own legal reckoning. Their corporate offices had been raided the same day as Karen's arrest. Their entire business model of disguised surveillance through community infrastructure was exposed, affecting developments across 3 states. The Oakwood Estates Community Center hosted a different kind of meeting now. Residents actively participated in creating new governance structures, with transparency as the guiding principle. I offered guidance without dominating, sharing expertise while empowering neighbors to protect themselves in the future. The technology is not inherently harmful, I explained to the Technology Oversight Committee that had been established. But proper disclosure, consent, and security protocols must be mandatory. The legal settlement from Clearview Technologies provided substantial funds for neighborhood improvements. The tennis courts were resurfaced, the playground equipment updated, and the community pool renovated, all without additional assessments to homeowners. Several former board members approached me privately in the weeks that followed. Some offered apologies for their complicity, while others sought leniency in exchange for cooperation with authorities. I directed all of them to the appropriate legal channels, maintaining professional distance from the ongoing investigation. Tom Jenkins was elected interim HOA president, with Sarah Miller serving as vice president. Their first official act was to establish new bylaws requiring absolute transparency in all financial decisions and contracts. Every vendor relationship would be publicly disclosed, along with any potential conflicts of interest. "We could not have done this without you," Sarah told me during the community cookout celebrating the reopening of the renovated park. "You could have," I replied. "You just needed someone to take the first step against intimidation." In the months that followed, I observed the transformation of our community with quiet satisfaction. The physical appearance of the neighborhood remained largely unchanged, but the atmosphere had fundamentally shifted. Neighbors greeted each other warmly, community events had record attendance, and board meetings featured active, respectful participation. Karen Whitfield pled guilty to reduced charges in exchange for testimony against her business partners. The full extent of their operation continued to unfold through court proceedings, revealing similar schemes in communities across the region. On warm evenings, I often sat on my front porch, exchanging friendly waves with passing neighbors. The roof had been professionally repaired, with no trace remaining of the tower that had once stood there. The invasion of my property had been thoroughly erased, but the impact of standing against it remained. There was deep satisfaction in having used my specialized skills not for government operations abroad, but to protect the very community I called home. My training had prepared me to identify and neutralize threats to national security. I never expected to apply those same skills against threats hiding behind suburban authority. The experience reinforced a fundamental truth: power exercised without accountability inevitably leads to abuse. Karen Whitfield had believed herself untouchable, protected by rules she manipulated and fear she cultivated. She never considered that someone might have both the skill and determination to hold her accountable. As I watched children playing in the park that had once been neglected under the old regime, I reflected on the importance of standing up to abuses of power. Sometimes, protecting your community requires the courage to challenge those who claim to protect it. The sun set over Oakwood Estates, casting golden light across homes that were truly ours again.